We're going to give everybody just another second here. We got a bunch of giveaway stuff tonight, and we're going to have Chase Vick from the shop. He's going to be doing the seminar with us tonight. He's one of our resident offshore experts. So hopefully we'll teach you a little bit about this winter fishery. This whole Wahoo, dolphin, tuna thing for the winter, this is a fairly new fishery for most, if not all of us. For me personally, I have a love-hate relationship with the fads. The fads are great, and they've taught us a lot. But I also see people that call themselves charter boats that I don't really think are truly charter boats, because we have so many well-qualified charter boats, but they want to run these trips out to the fads, and that's their only option. I mean, they run out there, and if that's not happening, they don't know what to do. And that's what some of the stuff that we're going to cover and talk about tonight is, the fads are a great starting point, but it shouldn't be your only option. That's a long way to go, a lot of fuel, a lot of time, effort. So you do need to know some other things to make this fishery viable. Until we had the fads about, I don't know how long we've had them now, 5 to 7 years or so, we've always had this winter fishery. We just didn't really have some reasons to go do it. And when I say back in the day, I'm talking about in the late 80s and early 90s. We had one gentleman here, his name just slipped out of my head, but his Charlie Dawsey, and he ran a boat called the Latitude Adjustment, and he was a part-time recreational, part-time commercial fisherman, but he commercial fished Wahoo pretty much all winter long, and made a really good living at it for a long time, and he was the only one that did it. So this fishery's been around since the late 80s and probably well beyond that. But what the fads have done is they've given us more reason to go. Something to add, Chase?
I think, did it come on?
You can have that side. We'll give you that table.
I think what the fads did was give the recreational angler a point, a place, structure. Whereas before the fads, you had to study chlorophyll, altimetry, clarity of water, temperature breaks. You had to understand what was going on with the blue water and the green water, and that's where you went. You went to those breaks. You went to those areas where bait were. Well, the fads have give a place for that to congregate. And it's give a place for somebody to say, let's go to number 8. Same way with the oil rig. Let's go to Petronas. Let's go to Beer Can. And what's being lost is studying the water, understanding why the bait is there and why the fish are there.
And we're going to talk about that in more detail.
That's right.
As we go in later on. But yeah, go ahead.
Because before the fads, the fish were still there. They were still migrating. So was the bait. You just had to understand where to go.
I'm new. What's a fad? What are you talking about?
It's go ahead.
The fish attractant device. They were put out by the federal government. There's 8 of them. Number 1 is 63 miles. Number 8 is 82 miles.
So yeah, we're going to, like Chase was just mentioning about the chlorophyll, where the pretty water is at, what we call pretty water or blue water. We're going to go more in depth to that. This just kind of lead into some of the things that we're going to talk about. But you need more options than just the fads. Just 2 weeks ago, it was the weekend that they caught the a couple of the yellowfins that won in the rodeo and the big marlin that won. And I actually had a friend of mine going, they were going to the fads, and I'm like, guys, the fads are not in that really pretty water right now, but 11 miles east of Fad 6, there's a line that runs north and south for about 20 miles, and it's where, I don't remember which hurricane it was, but one of them ones that hit Central Florida. Well, all that dirty water was pushing out into the canyon, and there's a definitive, it's mud on this side and it's cobalt blue on this side. Well, that winning blue marlin and a couple of the winning tunas and stuff came from that edge. I'm like, he says, I don't know if we're gonna go there or not. I'm like, it's 11 miles from where you plan on going. You've already gone 80. What's another? I mean, it's right over there, straight east. They didn't go, they came home, they caught nothing that day. They had zero knockdowns, 0 bites, 0 nothing. And that's kind of one of the things that we're going to talk about tonight, you know. And a couple of the services that we use for that are Hilton's Real-Time Navigator and Rip Charts. And they're both about $200 a year subscription fee. You can look and download as many times as you want for that $200. I actually pay for both services because I like Rip Charts better on a mobile device and I like Hilton's Real-Time Navigator better on a desktop. So I pay for both. But you think about my buddies that went on that trip in the middle of October. Well, if you go 60 miles to the Fads, even if you've got a pretty economical boat, that's probably on the low side of $600 to $800 in fuel. And if you have trips or quads on your boat, that might do, I mean, you might be spending $1,500 to go. So that $400 subscription and knowing where to go, it's just like when you go bottom fishing, we need to know where the places are, the snapper group or whatever live. Well, that $200 to $400 a year, you have the information to know where to go. So this is just kind of like a little highlight point of things that we're going to go over tonight. So I'm just going to run through this a little bit. But, you know, this is a winter fishery. It's cold. And some of the colder days are going to be your better days. Slicker chute, jacket, bibs, boots, gloves, and a change of dry clothes. You need to carry that. And I take my dry clothes, I put them in a vacuum seal bag and vacuum seal them so I know they're going to be dry when I need them. Even more important, in the summer, if I was going to the Fads, I would file a float plan with my wife, my friends, somebody, let someone know where you're going to be. A float plan is more important in the winter than it is in the summer. We're probably not going to die of hypothermia if something happens in the summertime, but in the winter, when that water's, you know, gets down into the low 70s and high 60s, that's cold. I mean, you can get hypothermia pretty quick. The cold, dry air will dehydrate you faster, or if not faster, as fast as in the summertime. So having plenty of drinks on board is important. And to stay warm, protein will keep you warmer than carbohydrates will. So lots of protein snacks. And Chase, if you got something to interject while I'm going along, you stop me and say, hey, stop. So I already talked about Hilton's and Rip Charts.
There's one other service, and it may help some of you that are getting started with Hilton's and Real-Time Navigator. If you begin to study the water and study the maps and learn, there's one other service you can call. It's called ROFS. It was actually before these. They actually used to take the information that we couldn't see and produce a fishing point or area where fish should be. They still do it today. Today, we're just able to see what they see. But they can take fishing reports and read the water. And if you call them 36 hours in advance from your trip, tell them where you're leaving from, give them your boat and your fuel capacity, tell them what you want to catch, they will actually produce an analysis of an area that you are capable of getting to and give you waypoints where they feel like tuna will be, dolphin will be, wahoo will be. And the reason I suggest that is if you would use their analysis and take their analysis and then study the map, you would begin to correlate what they're reading and what you're seeing, so that then you can read the water yourself.
What's the percentage of accuracy?
I've used, I used them 4 times, and 2 of the 4 times I caught a 168 yellowfin and a 163. And I caught both those fish within a half a mile of the waypoint that they had given me in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. Is it always that way? It's fishing. But if I'm going to burn $1,000 worth of fuel, I would a lot rather at least be in the vicinity of where the altimetry, the clarity, the green and blue water's meeting, so I got a better shot. Instead of just, because you can go in the blue water out there and it be a desert. The blue water, I mean, just because it's blue doesn't mean it has fish. I mean, if the current is too strong, the bait will move. And you will be in what they call the blue desert. It's gorgeous to be there. But there's no fish there.
Yeah. The whole thing is about bait.
It's about bait.
If you find the bait, you find the fish.
Spell that? Was it Ross?
ROFF''S.
Yeah.
They're on the internet and they're great people.
Yeah.
You know,
So that one-time analysis, I think it's gone up in price.
it's $90.
Yeah.
It's $90.
Used to be 75, but it's a fairly detailed report. It's a couple pages.
Yeah.
And they'll fax it or email it to you.
The benefit it gives you is it lets you read what they see. Then you can look at your own apps and you begin to understand what they're reading, because you'll see their waypoints. A great example was the rip he was talking about running north and south. Me and Brandon were going to that rip, and we left at 4 o'clock, just me and him, and we left the pass dark. It's 2 to 3s. Daylight come up, it was 4 to 6s. Needless to say, we didn't make it 85 miles to the rip, but it was supposed to be 1 to 2s. That's how much it was different. So, but with their analysis, it's the same thing he said. It was going to be there. The fish were there.
That sounds kind of like our yellowfin day, the last Monday of the rodeo.
Exactly.
So, tell y'all a fish story. The last Monday of the rodeo, it's supposed to be another one of those days. 0.5 foot forecast. Tunas are going off at the Navarre Kayak Reef. So Chase has got a 28-foot scout. No,
Grady
not scout. Grady White. So me, Chase, and his wife Melissa, we load up that morning. We leave before daylight. We're going to be down at Kayak Reefs at daylight. Well, I'm telling you, we ran down there at 30 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour. You could went as fast as you wanted to go. As soon as the sun came up, it went from this to this. At 8 miles an hour trying to come home, I was dipping the bow. I mean, it was horrific. But the cool part of the day was the blackfins decided they did not want to bite that day. We caught a crap load of bonitas, a couple king mackerel, and 90% of y'all in this room are going to call bullshit on this, and that's okay. And I said that on the internet live. But we're driving along, and all of a sudden, bam, we get bit, and there's this massive explosion, and Chase is fighting. It's on a small rod, so it's kind of light, and it's pulling and pulling. And the fish is heavy. Man, I'm like, I can tell it's heavy. And all of a sudden, it just kind of swims up beside the boat. He didn't know he was hooked yet. But that yellowfin had to be over 125 because he was sickled. And when he exploded and bashed up on top of the water, straightened both hooks out, and boom, gone. But we were a mile and a half off the beach and had a yellowfin that was over 100.
And I wouldn't believe it if I wasn't the man on the rod.
And, and so normally, on most any day, I would have had that whole run on video, because that's where I put the GoPro, and the GoPro would have been running right there. That night, I had plugged it in to charge, and that morning I got on the boat, and obviously I didn't plug it in all the way because the GoPro was dead. But, about 4 or 5 years ago, Harold Staples on the Al Lynn won the yellowfin tuna division with a 160-something that he caught on the broken bottom about 4 or 5 miles offshore. a couple days after the rodeo, there were several of the big charter boats sitting on the knuckle, and there was a huge yellowfin blow up that day. None of them were prepared to catch them. But when those blackfins are up on the beach, there will be yellowfin. There's always a chance for yellowfin. Yes, sir.
On that day, what kind of line and what lure were you throwing?
We had him on
It
probably
was-
60-pound test line, and we had
Is that Rapala, purple and black?
that was on a
Rapala, I
Probably-
would say a stretch 25 size.
yeah.
Yeah, a lip plug. Yeah. What size is our leader? It was 80 pound. But he didn't know it, trust me. He didn't care.
But some other things that you need to have, I've seen this a lot on boats here lately. I have 2 boats that I run that one of them's a $2 million boat and one of them's a $1.5 million boat, and I get on both these boats this year, new boats to these customers, and I'm like, what the heck is with I can't read the bottom. And I'm scrolling through and I'm looking, changing settings on their sonars, and then I get to look at it, do they have the wrong transducer selected? Well, they got a $2 million boat, but they got a $600 transducer. They got a plain B175. Get the most powerful transducer you can afford. Your Garmin sonar is great. And it doesn't matter if you have the 7-inch or the 22-inch. The technology in the sonar is basically the same. The difference comes from your transducer. If you don't have a transducer, when we're out there, we're trying to look at schools of bait that are 1,000 feet deep sometimes. And if you don't have a quality transducer, you're not going to be able to read that. There are days that we primarily troll for these species, but there are days that you're going to want to stop at some of the fads and chum for them. I would, if I'm going that far, take 2 or 4 boxes of some northern mackerel that you can chum with. It's not that expensive, And a lot of these we're going to touch in more in depth about, but downriggers, trolling leads, and planer bridles. I love downriggers, I love trolling leads, I hate bridles. I just think that's dangerous, but we'll get into that.
So real quick, back to the transducer.
Yeah.
So, you're talking greater than 1 kW?
At least a 1 kW, and the Aramar B175 HW model. That's about a $1,600 transducer, but that will do everything that you need to do. That high wide, because you can change the plain B175, you can't change the frequencies on. But the HW, the high wide, you got a multitude of options. I think everybody's chair, except for some that came in late, there's one of these little quick rigged ballyhoo charts. This is step by step on how to rig ballyhoo. You need to take this home and study this and learn this. This is hugely important.
Anybody? Anyone? I'm gonna be out.
An assortment of lures that we're going to go over, surface baits, shallow baits, lipped diving baits, plenty of ice, tackle. Some of y'all probably have a set of tackle for bottom fishing. You got a set of tackle for nearshore trolling. You got a set of tackle for offshore trolling. And man, I'm jealous if y'all for y'all that have all that. My stuff has to be somewhat dual purpose. So most of my trolling gear is actually well overkill for what we need to do offshore. And everything here, all the rods that are here tonight are mine. But what I do is most of my stuff is run on bent butts that help us out not only when we're bottom fishing, but when we're trolling to get our setups better, but it makes it easier to fight fish. Well, the reels are the expensive part. The rods are not so bad. But if I have to buy, a set of reels that I'm going to use for bottom fishing and a set of reels that I'm going to use for trolling, well, that gets expensive. Well, when I'm going to go trolling, I have this is my typical trolling gear, our trolling rod. This is my bottom fishing rod. Well, I have everything set up that it makes it nice and easy. This happens to be another trolling rod, but just say this was a bottom fishing tip section. Just that fast. Now I can use it for bottom fishing. Most people would set up their trolling gear with probably like 50, 60 pound test line. My reels are all set up with 100-pound braid. There's 300 to 400 yards of 100-pound braid, and then 100 yards of 100-pound mono. It's way overkill, yes, for trolling. I don't need that. But I need that when I want to use this for groupers and jacks. But I just changed the tip sections of the rods out. I have 2 16s and 2 Talica 25s that I use for both bottom and for trolling. That way I can get dual purpose out of some of my gear. And I know most of you on your boats, these work great for fighting out of a rod holder. If your boat's going this way, if this is the gunnel of your boat, your rod holders, not the 2 on the very stern, but the next 2 up and maybe 2 more if you have them, they're going to be angled out like this. So it's real easy. You're fighting over the side of the boat. That's great and wonderful. Those 2 rod holders become very useful with your bent butt rods. The 2 that are in your 2 back corners, they're going to face like this and the motors are right there. So you're fighting the fish, it's very easy to get tangled in those motors. Well, for just a little bit of investment, you can there's a couple different manufacturers that make them, but the Jim Lux lockable swivel rod holders. It just replaces the 2 back rod holders that you have, and then those rod holders can adjust to there's this little push of a button and the whole rod holder turns. Real neat little addition. They're kind of expensive. They're about $300 a piece, but over the course they're well worth their money. And then I like my rods to have the short butts on them, because if I do want to fight out of a belt or a fighting harness, the long butts, the rod is much higher and it's much further away from me. It puts you in a really bad fighting position even with the harness. So all my rods have short butts. Depending on your boat, if you have normal 9-inch rod holders, you have plenty of room for your hand to reel from the rod holder. If you have a little bit larger vessel, you may have 11-inch rod holders. In that case, your rod is going to bottom out and you can't really even turn the handle because of the gunnel. We don't currently carry them, but we have them on order. They make drop-in rod holder extenders, and I meant to bring mine, and they're at Mahi. They're in my other bag because I brought the different bag that I meant to. But they just drop right in the rod holder if you have the 11-inch ones. And the drop-in rod holders, they come in 2-inch, 4-inch, and 6-inch. I've never seen a rod holder that I needed the 6-inch. The 2-inch are normally more than sufficient for anybody's boat, even if you have 11-inch rod holders. What else do we need in this part? So I'm sure, y'all probably wouldn't be here if you didn't know what Wahoo were, Mahis, and probably have pictures of Tuna somewhere. Maybe not. Yep. So if you don't have the numbers to the fads, I mean, I haven't posted on our website, on our Facebook page. If you go to www.dustinfortwalton.com, they have a website where all the county reefs are published. The fad numbers are real easy to get. And one of the gentlemen earlier asked what a fad was, and that's fad 6. All the fads look like this. They're all currently on. We have them. I think they're all back.
They're
on
all
station.
later back. They have put them all back.
We had the summer storms had knocked 3 of them loose, but they're all back now. And this fad is much bigger than you think it. Do I have a picture of the whole fad?
They're about 6 foot in diameter.
Yeah, and they're 30 something feet. There's only this about 6 feet out of the water, but there's about 30 feet of this below the water. One of the things the fads get off, the storms knock them off station all the time, and they have to put them back. But fishermen knock them off station also. Do not tie up to the fad. You know, help us all out. Don't tie up to one of these things.
That is one of the benefits of RIP charts. It has all the fad locations on it, as well as most of the oil rigs in the Gulf and all of your weather buoys. So it actually has more information on it than just information about the ocean. It has the structure as well.
That's it. So this is one off of Hilton's right here. See if I got a different one.
Hilton's does not run on an app. That's why he says it's better on a desktop.
No, it does run an app.
Have they got an app now?
Yep.
Well, that's something new to me.
So this happens to be a Hilton shot that was off of North Carolina, but this is where you would want to fish. You got this green water on one side, there's blue water here, we got blue water down here. When you're on the app live, and I can pull it up on my phone if they got a good shot, you have a live cursor. You can sit here and scroll down this line and mark points at home. You know, it will give you exactly where this is. It won't work once you get out of cell phone range, but you can mark points on here and then take a screenshot of that and then have those points so when you go. But that's actually a Hilton's shot. And then go back. This is one that came off of RIP charts. Now this is our area here. The fads, I don't have them. And you can like Chase was saying, they have the fads, the oil rigs. You can toggle that on and off, as well as your bathymetry in the bottom where the ledges and stuff are. You can turn all that off and on. Yes, ma'am.
Tim, have you been on the boat yet that has Starlink, where you have that real time while you're out on the boat?
Yes.
How do you like it?
It works really good.
That's what I like.
It's really good on Saturdays, and it's college football and snapper season, and we can be 40 miles offshore and snapper fishing and watch college football. It's great. If you can afford Starlink, definitely get it. It's cool.
What is the gray areas?
Clouds. So the question up here was, what are the gray areas? That's clouds. And the format that you want to look at is you want to look at a 3-day composite, where most of the time, if you just get today's single image, you may have a lot of cloud cover or something in there. But if you go to the 3-day composite, it'll clean the picture up quite a bit. But of course, Destin here, we got the southwest edge up here. This is the nipple. Here's the spur. The fads would sit right here. But you can see on this particular day, there's kind of dirty water over this way with a real good hard line push here. And this is real blended up in here. The fads would have been sitting in real pretty water on this particular day. And if you have the range, that line right there is incredible. Now that's 280 miles, but that's good. And this right down here would actually be pretty good too. This is Lloyd's Ridge right down here. That's about 120 miles down to Lloyd's Ridge. Yes, sir.
Sam, one of the criticisms I've heard of Hilton's is that it's not real-time information. That there's a delay between the time they pick up satellite imagery and the time they get it posted on their site. I've heard anywhere from 24 hours or more. Does that make a difference as you're planning your fishing?
So the gentleman's comment was that he heard that Hilton's is not always real time. So the time is the same for all. It's based on the GO satellite passes, and we only get 4 passes per day. So there is a little bit of lag, but it's not, Hilton's is not 24 hours behind. It's not that far behind. And in both cases, if you have questions, if you call the number on the Hilton's website or you call Rip Charts, I can't remember the 2 guys' names at Rip Charts, but Tom Hilton, I mean, get him on the phone, man. He's got years and years and years experience reading this stuff. And the things that he can teach you over the phone, they're both really good people. And they're more than happy to spend time with you on the phone and help with questions. You know, the hardest one to read for most people, and for most of us, this will not come into play. Altimetry, you know, water color, water clarity, the amount of chlorophyll, temperature, all that is great. And if I can fish those color breaks and temperature breaks, that's where you're really going to make a difference. But when you have an altimetry break like this is insanity. But generally speaking, we will not see altimetry changes up in the area that we fish. You have to be quite a bit further offshore before you start seeing this. But we're not going to spend a lot of time on that because that's really out of most people's range. You know, you see some altimetry changes inshore, but there's no hard definitive breaks up in here. So weed line. Tell us about weed lines.
Those are heaven. They didn't exist this year from what I've seen. I never seen any well-formed weed lines. But I may not have went far enough either.
We saw some there during the spring. We did good on some of them inshore stuff.
But they had dissipated. They had gotten thin. We didn't see, in my opinion, any of the thick, heavy weed lines that attract the bait and the fish like I had seen in the past. Maybe I didn't go far enough. You know, I remember on a July 4th week, this was probably in 2011 or 12, we took the whole week because it was going to be flat, and we ended up at the Blind Faith. And on the way there, we found a weed line that was over a mile long and 3 football fields wide. And we caught dolphin all day, big dolphin. But it was the time of year, the currents were right, we happened to be at the right place at the right time.
So which side of the weed line do we fish, and how do we fish a weed line?
Well, the first thing that I want to do is I don't want to bust it. I want to ease up beside it and run parallel with it. I don't never want to run through it. I want to run parallel with it, and I want to find out is there any bait there. And that's easy. You can look under it. You can throw out some small trolling lures, just like we use for blackfin, to assess, or you can pitch a live bait. If you have live bait, you can just put somebody on the bow and throw a live bait out, see what happens. If I'm going to troll it, I'm going to run parallel. And if I don't get a strike on one side, I'm going to move to the other. To say that the fish are always on the clear side, that's not always the case. You know, those fish are swimming. So I have found fish on both sides. It's a matter if there's life there. If there's vibrant life there, if you throw a live bait in the water on a hook, you'll know it because those fish will come see you. It won't take long either.
And generally speaking, you'll find it much easier to fish and troll the pretty water side because on the pretty water side, the water's pushing. So out here on this pretty water side, you don't have all the little patches.
It keeps your lures clean. Your first mate ain't got to work so hard.
On the dirty water side, that water's pushing that line, and some of them pieces can be a half a mile from the main part of the line, and you can work yourself to death on that side of the line. So be cognizant of that. And
Normally what happens with the weed lines also is you'll get a temperature difference. Because if it's a thick mat of weeds, it's going to attract sunlight, just like something black or you know, a darker color. So you're going to get a temperature difference with that hard push of water stacking those weed lines up on those tide lines. And if you get a real temperature break of, I mean, we think of a temperature break of 10 degrees. Well, you're looking for a temperature break of 1.5 degrees. Just that amount of difference from one side to the other will make all the difference in the world if there's fish there because they can feel it. It's like, analogy is, if you ever rode a motorcycle, you're on top of the hill in July in the morning, and it's 85 degrees, and you go down in the bottom, how the cool air takes you over because you descended. Same way for them. You know, just a little bit of temperature difference, they feel better. They enjoy that cooler water.
So when I was back here on the weed line, you said that you would want to troll parallel down this weed line.
Correct.
So now we found just a patch. So now what's my, you know, this is just a size, you know, say the size of this room here.
Do I have
Not-
live bait?
That depends on if you let, that depends on you. Did
See,
you-
whenever I went...
I don't go, I hate to go without bait. I just,
Yeah,
you know.
when we left the pass to go, I mean, if you're going to go 100 miles, take the time to that afternoon before to catch bait. And keep them alive overnight if you're going to leave. But what we used to do is, if we would leave at 5 o'clock on Thursday afternoon. And we'd point the boat there and let it run 12 miles an hour on autopilot. And 12 hours later, we were 144 miles off the coast. And we got 3 miles to the gallon. A lot different than running 45 miles an hour for 4 hours.
at
And-
0.7.
At 0.7 and trying to catch all the fish and get back. So we were there when the sun, well actually an hour before the sun come up, wherever our target was. So that way we had our lines in the water and we were ready to fish when the sun broke the ocean. I mean, there's nothing like it. So, but if I got live bait, I'm pitching live bait to that. You know, I'm not going to try to troll a circle. I'm going to put a live bait and I'm going to free line him off the bow of the boat. Just like you do for king mackerel when you're bottom fishing. I'm going to cast it under the weed line and see what happens.
And what about jigs, poppers, choices? Which one do you like better?
If it's early morning, I'll try a popper. If it's just like the fish come up early in the mornings, right? That's when the bait comes up. That's when we catch bait at the pass. Okay? We catch bait. We don't catch bait before daylight. But at daylight, the bait tends to move up and we catch bait. Same way out there. The bait starts to move up, so a popper would work. GI jigs, any kind of lure that you've been successful catching your regular dolphin inshore, give it a try. The depth of water, the only thing changed, you hope, is size of fish. That's what you hope is 100 miles you're catching 35-pound dolphin instead of 14-pound dolphin. Okay.
And the story I told earlier about the rip that was 11 miles east of Fad 6, it's not this particular rip, but that's what it would have looked like, where you have this super pretty water on one side and super dirty water on the other side. We typically only get this setup after storms, and it's much more common with the spring storms than with the fall storms. But we can have this any time of the year. If there's enough fresh, dirty water, rainwater pushing out of some of the rivers that it will push far enough offshore into the areas that we're fishing, is where we get these setups. Now, unlike when Chase said if it's a weed line, they could be on either side, I feel like on this, that they're only going to be on the pretty water side. And the reason for that, the green water on the other side of a weed line, that water is not necessarily silty. This water is very silty, and these are all pelagic species. This will clog their gills. This will kill them. So they can be in this water, but they can't stay in that water. They have to come in, get back to the clean water side. So I know I put. So I got several different trolling spreads. This is one that you wanted. So we're going to troll down this weed line. What makes you think of this is how I need to set up my spread? The size of my lure, the color of my lure, size, color, and where in the spread does that go?
So it matters where I'm at and what my target is. You know, if I'm 125 miles off, like I hope I am this coming Saturday morning, first, what boat am I on? It matters. Size of boat, is it outboards? Is it screws, inboard, outboards, like the big charter boats? Because every hull is going to displace and move the water differently. What's the ocean doing? Is the ocean 1 to 2s, which is we all hope it is, or is it 3 to 4s? That affects where you put your lure. It affects the speed of your boat, how fast you're going to pull your lure. The traditional lures.
Are you fishing in the ocean Saturday?
They want me to go to the oil rig Saturday night.
It's a long way to the ocean from here.
I'm sorry, the Gulf.
Said that, there's nothing I hate
Yeah.
more than people saying
So traditional lures.
They're gonna go across to Jacksonville and launch over there.
These are my lures that I brought. Everybody ought to have blue and white Islanders. And I know it sounds crazy, but the old plain cedar plug. Okay?
There's been more billfish caught on that lure
That right there.
than all other lures combined.
Now
In
they
the
make,
history of time.
they make the blue and white Islander in several shapes and sizes and heads. You know, I've got mine rigged where I have a spring and a point for the ballyhoo, so I can put ballyhoo under them and spring them down. So I'm not just trolling naked lures. I've actually got a ballyhoo on the lure.
So that is this little thing that was sitting in your seat, what he's talking about. How to rig those ballyhoo for that.
So size of lures, in my opinion, you got where are you at? If I'm there this weekend, if I'm at the oil rig this weekend and I'm a half a mile away from it trolling for yellowfin, I've seen them busting, then I'm fishing a 9 to 11, 11 to 13 inch lure. You know, I'm not trolling. I'm not trolling a 6 inch lure. I'm just not. I mean, that defeats my purpose of what my target is. Now, if I'm trolling if I hadn't seen any action and there's nothing on the sounder but blackfin, changes my lure size. Okay? And I'll vary my lures. You know, I'm going to put a big blue and white outrigger. I might put green and yellow on the other side, or purple and black. And the reason for that is I got to figure out what's in the water, matching the hatch, right? What are they eating? What are they popping on the surface? Once I get one hit on that color lure, one of those lures is coming out of the 5 in the spread and going to that color. So I figure out what they want. As far as a cedar plug or, you know, sometimes I pull it behind a big bird. Okay? So that bird runs in the water like a boat, pops back and forth. Faster you run, the more noise it makes. You know, and that's, sometimes I wonder, the people that are trolling, do they understand why they're trolling? You are trying to mimic bait. Okay? And your lures are the fish that are getting left behind. Does that make sense? So your screws on your motors and the whitewash off your hull, that's the bait pod. If you think about watching Bonita out here crash, big foamy water in a circle, right? Well, that's what your boat's creating. And these things that are straggling behind, they're the wounded warriors, right? They're the ones going to get eat first.
And if you go to my very first slide, it explains that in just a little bit different way. But it's the laws of nature. If we're in Africa and there's wildebeest out there and there's lions, they're looking for the young, the weak, the old, and the injured. Well, when you are first setting out in the day and you have several lures of one color, of the same color, and one oddball, this is where we're going to get bit, because that's that young, the weak, the old, and the injured. That's exactly what Chase just said in different terminology than I use, but it's an important thing to realize that this is nature repeating itself. And just like any other kind of fishing, we may have differing opinions on where the lures go and the colors that we fish with. But I think that the whole thing about being willing to experiment a little bit, you know, one for me is, that I like, is a big blue marlin. He will come and eat the lure for me to chase behind the boat. And a big yellowfin, he might not come from here to, they're leery. They didn't get to be big yellowfins for nothing. From here to the door may not be near far enough behind the boat. So generally, my largest and darkest lures are going to start close to the boat, and as I get further away from the boat, the lures get smaller and lighter in color.
Most of my big yellowfin have been caught right there. The lost leader, the last one in the group. They're more comfortable with that. When I put that lure out right there, to me it's in clean water. There's no bubbles around it. There's no nothing. If you think it's far enough out, give it another 50 or 100 foot. You know what I'm saying? It needs to be out there in clean water, making its own smoke trail. Because most of the lures that I use, chugger heads, slant heads, prowler heads, they all make a trail of smoke in the water. Go ahead.
You run spreader bars or daisy chains and have a place in the spread where you think those sit the best?
So this is a daisy chain I pull. Okay. And normally I will put a bird in front of this to even make more noise. Okay, so yes, the idea is to make as much noise in the water with your lures as possible, because that draws attention. Sound, water splashing, all of that draws attention to your spread. The problem is what is your boat size? Do your outriggers have triple locations on them? Are they 22 footers? Are they 16s? So if I'm going to troll with daisy chains, I'm going to put them on my outriggers and I'm going to stagger them. Way out, I'm going to have a lure. Inside, I'm going to have a daisy chain on both sides, because I want the mass, the daisy chains, in relation to the boat, because then that looks more like a bigger bait school, and it makes the ones that get lost even more attractive. Does that make sense? You know.
And the more that, you know, the more daisy chains, the more spreaders, the more things like that you use, it is important to have everyone on the boat have a job and know what to do when we get a strike. because the captain has to drive the boat. Whoever's the designated angler for this bite has to get the rod, and that means our mate or extra people, they have got to clear some of that stuff. You know, the big thing, you know, and what I don't like is I like to see people who want to stop when they get a bite. You want to keep going when you get a bite. You can slow down a little bit, but keep going because you may get multiple hookups. But you do need to clear some stuff. And the captain having a good idea, okay, if the port rod got bit, well, I need to make my circle into the port side and keep that fish inside. If I do that, I only have to clear 1 or 2 lines and I can leave everything else out. You turn the other way, you're going to have to clear more stuff. So it is everybody knowing what to do.
And one other thing let's say this port outrigger goes down, okay? So you get starboard outrigger goes down. You're going to clear this line first, right? So that way this guy and the captain can turn and keep the fish here. Well, what happens at speed when you make that turn is all these lures, it's like slingshot. They pick up the pace. They've changed. And this fish is hooked. Everybody else in the water around this fish already knows something's up. So when these lures change speed, you're liable to get another knockdown. Okay? That's why you don't throttle. You don't throttle back because you may get a second hookup. But the other thing is if you throttle back as big as these hooks are, you know, you're pulling this lure at, my boat likes 11 miles an hour. I don't do knots, I'm sorry, I just, I don't. Okay. I do miles an hour. Okay. So, you imagine a fish running by this at 18, 20 miles an hour and hitting it, and you're going in a different direction than he is, what kind of hole it makes in his mouth. You pull the throttle back, lure just slipped out of that hole. And you just get to reel it in and put it back out. So, I mean, now I'm not saying keep full troll speed, 11 miles an hour to 8, until some control is gained over the spread and everybody on the boat. Because, everybody freaks out, fish on, So, until everybody gains their composure again, keep speed, keep forward momentum. If you got Helm Master or the Mercury, go straight. Just hit a button up there, hit a waypoint up there 3 miles away and let the boat drive itself. If you need to step back and help. A straight line is great for the entire trolling spread. You can control the fish in a straight line, okay? And you don't put so much pressure on your mates that may not have the experience you have.
Just to stick into what you were saying about turning into the line where the fish is dead. Just a little bit on end game there. I mean, it's been my approach that when we're getting the fish clear, I'm turning into the fish, trying to keep a clear gap shot off the starboard quarter or port quarter. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would, if the motors were here, I want to keep the fish here. I want my angler up the gunnel somewhere so the whole back corner is open for my wireman and gaff man. I mean, I want him to have his space. These bigger fish, not only their teeth on the Wahoo, but I've seen a 50-pound Mahi bend the stanchion on a fighting chair. So when you come into the boat with him, I want as much space back there as possible. And if your boat is set up where you can, the thing to do is when you gaff one, I mean, everything we see on Facebook and Instagram, a lot of those videos are set up for your enjoyment. And they gaff the fish and they put it in the boat. That is the wrong thing to do. You should gaff the fish, especially with, tunas, typically you gaff him, he's dead. But with Wahoo and Mahi, gaff the fish, open the fish box, in the fish box, shut the lid, somebody sit on it. Because he'll knock the lid off. but go straight to the fish box. Don't put him in the deck. I mean, every video you see on Facebook, they've gaffed that wahoo and stuck him in the boat. And what they don't show you is the person that got bit. Or the one that had that 12-aught hook that Chase was talking about stuck in the side of their arm, and that fish is doing this, and they're screaming their head off, and they don't have a pair of bolt cutters on the boat. And I told you earlier, put your clothes in a Ziploc or in a vacuum seal bag. Go to Home Depot, Lowe's, come by our store. They're $20 for a small set of bolt cutters. Hope you never use them. Vacuum seal it, put it somewhere on the boat so when you go to use it, it's not rusted where you can't use it. But have bolt cutters on your boat. One day you're going to need them, and you'll be thankful that you got them. And I know some of these little slides and stuff are kind of hard to see. These are all on our website. If you go to halfhitch.com and then go and click on the More button, and under More, it's going to say Fishing Tips. You go to the Fishing Tips, and you scroll down. You may have to scroll a ways down to find offshore trolling stuff. All these different slides on how to set up your trolling spreads are right there. So you have.
So let's talk about, he was talking about placement and color. Let's talk about spread. You're out there in 8,000 feet of water, 2,000 feet of water. And if all you're trolling is surface lures, you're covering the surface. Those bait pods, they swim at depth and they get pushed to the surface. That's why they're jumping, because they're being pushed to the surface and eaten. Okay? So anytime you're trolling out there, you're right or left short, doesn't matter to me. One of them, and this is just me, one of mine is always this plug. That one right there. That's just, I'm just going to put that on my right short, and I'm going to, all of mine are already rigged with leaders on them. Already ready to go to a snap swivel on my trolling gear, so I can swap colors, lures, I can swap anything I want in 2 minutes, right? This one has a long leader, and the reason for that is I want my snap swivel 2 feet in the water, just in the water, and then I know this lure is in the right spot behind my boat. This is my measurement.
How long is it?
It's about 25 feet. Oh, I want this right here in the middle of the prop wash. I want this right here to look like a bonita that's in the middle of the school, eating bait, shaking.
And when it's 25 feet behind the boat, it's, you see prop wash, that bait's really not in the prop wash, it's under the prop wash.
It's right
That
under the
bait's-
bubbles.
It's in clear water.
It's in clear water.
The prop wash only goes down about 2 or 3 feet. So you,
Is it in the water more as a teaser, or are you gonna catch fish on
Oh,
it?
It's a
you'll-
Wahoo lure.
So then you got a hand line it in.
oh,
Long leaders mean that when you reach your barrel swivel, you got to have somebody good enough on the boat to wire the fish in. But, and if you notice, it's not wire, it's mono. Because, I mean, I've had so many of these get hit. This is a pretty new one here. It has never been hit. This is my newest one. The Wahoo is going to come by and cut this lure right there, just like that. I've never caught one on this hook. It's always the rear hook. They've hit him so many times, they've actually cut the lure in half. They've just cut it in half, wore it in half. There's a big piece of wire that runs through the middle of this structure, and it's orange under this purple and black, or at least it used to be.
I think it's,
Have they changed the color? So when they cut it in half, then they come back and make a second pass. Well,
You ever run that with a lead, or
I don't never run this with lead. You know,
how far back usually? I know it depends on the boat, but generally.
that's a 25-foot leader, so as soon as my swivel hits the water, I stop. He is very short. Yeah, he's short. And then to cover other depth, go ahead.
What pound, is that 200?
200. 200. To cover depth, you can mix this in on your left short. See, the whole thing about being out there is you need to cover the column. If you're not going to do a downrigger or a planer, then you need to buy some lures that cover column. Because You don't want everything on the surface.
How far back you run that lip plug?
It's according to the surface and how fast I'm running. You know, these right here, when you get into the really,
How far down do you want it?
these right here have a depth of 40 feet, the big one. Now, Nomad's making one now that's a high-speed 220. You actually, we didn't bring one. You actually have to have a 50 wide to pull the lure.
Oh, yeah, the 200 is the biggest one we
Yeah.
got.
So, yeah. I mean, you have to have a 50 wide to have enough drag or the lure will creep. That's how much drag is on the actual reel. But you need to cover column. Down, a little higher, and then your surface baits.
So a downrigger is, to me, is better than lip trolling baits, but it adds a level of difficulty, and you need an extra person to be able to deal with. For most people, you need an extra person to deal with a downrigger.
You're limited on your speed too, aren't you?
Not really. You can troll downrigger at 20 knots. Yeah, just need a
But
bigger
that
ball.
adds a level of difficulty, and because that 10-pound ball at 100 feet, it's a great way to put your bait right where, if your sounder's shooting from 1,000 foot and up and you see fish at 800 feet, wouldn't you love to be able to get one at least 250 close to them? Because if you're trolling on the surface, they're probably not interested. So it's a great way to do it, but it is very difficult to control the downrigger ball. Then you got a piece of wire in the water. And that wire is not friendly with props, and it's not friendly with another fish on a lure if you get bit.
And see, and if I have a quality captain, a quality mate, and a quality angler, my actual favorite, instead of actually running a downrigger, is to run a number 16 planer. And I run a planer off a hand line, not like on a planer bridle as part of my rod and reel setup. And that planer never comes out of the water. It goes in the water at the beginning of the day, it's going to stay there all day. That is, if I have a quality captain, quality mate, and a quality angler. That planer is going to stay in the water. And all I do when I want to run something, because I can get a planer much, much deeper than I can get a downrigger ball. But I use a double-ended snap and a number 32 rubber band. And if this was the planer line, I clip one end of the snap around the planer line, and then the double snap, the other end has a rubber band which goes around my line, and I just slide that down. The force of the water will run that all the way to the planer. At the end of the day, when we reel that planer up, there might be 30 snap swivels down there. If it had 30 bites, there's going to be 30 snap swivels. But I'll only pull that up once a day. Something I guess we need to talk a little bit about is, Chase has mentioned a couple things about how close and how far away. You want, your boat, and he mentioned this earlier in a different term, but as each vessel throws a wake at a different rate. So there is no, this is exact science. So don't say this is going to work for everybody's boat. But a good basic setup, twin engine, smaller boat, having a bait in the third wake, the fifth wake, the seventh, the ninth, and then one that's way, way back. I think 5 rods is plenty for most people. As far as these distances go, I've got some on here, if you go 50, 75, 100, 125, and 300 feet. That's hard for a lot of people to judge that when they're letting it out. How far is that? So there are 2 things that you can do. As you're just trolling along, before you really start to set the spread, take your reel and go 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, just like you would if you're going to bottom fish, and put it out there like 10 Mississippis. Then, and figure out, now start reeling that in and counting, figure out how far you just put that back there. Or, better yet, is to mark your line. Take permanent marker and know where the rods are going to go and pre-mark your lines. So I know when I get to this mark, this one's going to be 50 feet. And then the other one's going to be 75 feet. And then if they get mixed up during the day, when I make my marks on here, 1 mark is my short rod. 2 marks is my next rod. 3 marks in a row, that's my third. 4 marks, and then 5 marks is my furthest one back.
You should always, on these trolling rigs, there's something we hadn't mentioned is drags, as well as marking the line. You gotta understand where your lure is, but you also gotta understand what's the drag on it. You know, is that drag, the reel that pulls that lure, the drag setting at strike is completely different than the one pulling this lure. Okay? Completely different. Because the reel has to overcome the drag of the actual lure first, not the strike of the fish. A lot of difference in drag settings. So before you go and spend the money and the effort to go do this, when you're at home, that preparation for this type of fishing is huge. You know, you should get out in the backyard and pull 100 yards of line off and mark it. Mark it every 25 yards with a black magic marker. You need a brass scale. Digital scales are great, right? Well, there's nothing better than the old brass scale. And set your drags. And you need to mark your reels so that you understand what the drag setting is at strike. Is it 12 pounds? Is it 13 pounds? And when I move past strike, what is that drag setting? Okay? Because if you're out there and you have an opportunity to fish of a lifetime, and your angler runs over there and pushes that drag all the way to the bottom, you just lost your fish. You know, and you know, sometimes fish of a lifetime come one time. You know, one time.
And when you go from strike to full on your reel, generally that adds 25%. So if we're trolling, I'm going to use 100 pound for easy numbers. If I have 100 pound, which is what I have on my reels because I use them for bottom fishing, well, typically we would set our drag, well, let's use 60 because that's more common what people are going to troll with. So 60 pound test, the drag should be set at 1/4 of the line's breaking strength, which would be about 15 pounds in the strike position. When we go to full, now we're at 20. You never, like Chase said, if you just shove that forward, that fish just broke off. If you have to add more drag because he's dumping the reel and you're going to need to get everything reeled in and get this angler on the bow and chase this fish, you want to slowly increase the drag till you get the fish stopped. As soon as you get him stopped, you want to back off that drag a little bit. So you've increased the drag by pushing it forward towards the full position. But you got to think, when you tested your reel and set your reel at 15 pounds of drag, that was on a full spool of line. At 3/4 of a spool, you've just increased the drag by 10%. At half a spool, you've increased it another 10%. At 3/4 of a spool, you've got another 10%. So all of a sudden, we got 45 pounds of drag on this fish. We may need to back it off further than strike when that reel is at 3/4 full, and as we start to gain some line back, we can slowly add more drag back in.
There's one thing that as you troll, you're going to find this out. With the top shots, a 30 wide Tiagra or a 50 wide Tiagra. You know, that a 50 wide Tiagra is going to hold about 750 yards of a 100-pound braid. It's going to hold about 250 of your mono, right? Think about this. You get a big strike. The yellowfin, the 168 we called it, took 2 hours and 21 minutes to put him on the boat. Okay? He death rolled, because I was in 4,000 feet of water. When he left on that 30 wide, and it should have been a 50, he almost spooled it. Think about the drag coefficient on that line that far out in the water. Think about what you've added to it. As that fish swims, that line is not straight. That line is bowing. That line is dragging through the water. So you are building drag against your line once you get 300 or 400 yards out that you have not taken into account with that reel. Okay? That is a big deal when you're fighting big fish. You get a 60, 80-pound wahoo hit, and he takes 400 yards of line immediately. The drag is different because of where he's at in relation to the boat and the water. So try to keep that in mind. And then the biggest thing I can encourage anyone to do is you've done the work, you've done the preparation, you've got the strike. Try to maintain composure and enjoy catching the fish. Because if everybody goes crazy, 9 times out of 10, you might not get it to the boat. Because once you get a fish that far away from the boat, it takes skill to get him to the boat. You're not just going to win that battle like a 30-pound king 8 miles off the beach. It's just not going to work out that way.
Questions? All right. So we kind of talked about downriggers. That's my rubber band setup I was talking about. Where you got a snap here and a snap here and rubber band to the line. Ballyhoo. You know, on Chase's favorite bait, he was showing that little Yozuri Bonita. Well, this is the same thing in a Nomad. It's real important to rig these correctly. And what I think is correct and what Chase thinks is correct may not be the same. And that's okay. There's more than one way to do it. But I'm telling you, these lures are not cheap. And unlike a lot of them, you know, these are anywhere from $30 to $50 lures. These Bonita tile lures, they are very easy to lose a $50 lure and never have a bite. These lures go through the water. Chase was talking about this, how hard they vibrate and how well they attract fish. If you attach either your mono or your wire directly to this ring that's on here, you're probably not going to have that lure more than 1 or 2 trips. You're going to wear through it during the course of the day, and that's just going to break and come loose. I rig mine with a stainless thimble. That way the thimble is riding against this and the mono is riding inside the thimble. The thimble will come open like this. It's going to go through the lure and you're going to close the thimble once you get it on. And it doesn't matter, you can rig this on wire or mono, but we close that little thimble up to rig our lure. But those little thimbles they come in a pack. I don't know, they probably cost somewhere between 25 cents and 25 to 50 cents a piece. They will save you a $50 lure. They're well worth every penny. Is that how you rig yours?
I don't use the stainless steel. I normally use nylon, but
The nylon thimble, same.
you have to use a thimble on all the trolling lures up here. And y'all welcome to come up here and look at them, go through them. You know, take measurements of the leaders. I mean, that's
So
everything has thembles or
yeah.
protection. Everything, and everything's a crimp. In this world here, there are no knots.
Why are you using nylon thimble instead of stainless?
I don't like the harmonics. I don't like all the vibrations. I don't like things rubbing together. That's just me. There's no gospel about this, and that's why that tackle store is so big. Here's what's going to happen. Y'all going to take a little bit of what we talked about today, and somebody here is going to go out there and be successful, and you're going to trust that lure, and you're going to trust the way you rigged it because it caught your fish. That's how lures become popular, is because they catch fish.
And the thing is, Chase and I can look at his gear and look at my gear. We're both the same way. We both rig our stuff on mono. I know a lot of really, really good Wahoo fishermen. Everything is rigged on wire. And that's kind of like the thimble thing, stainless versus nylon. It's just we're getting really, really picky at that point and breaking something down. But we're both mono guys.
The other thing we've talked about today, most everything we've talked about today is 10-knot trolling. It's trolling with ballyhoos, yozuris, cedar plugs, birds. We haven't even touched the surface of high speed. That's a totally different world, because at 20 knots, you got to have some wire, or your lures won't make it. I mean, you know, if you come to the store and you look at all the weighted Tormentors and the big DTX 220s, you have to put wire on them, or you won't have a lure. I mean, but then you have to step to a completely different class of reel in order to hold the lure against the water to pull it. I mean, there's people out there planing. They are on plane, and they're wahoo fishing.
I mean, it is not uncommon for people to wahoo fish anymore at 20 to 25 knots.
Why are you using 200, not 300?
I just found it was strong enough. You know, I've only ever lost one of these lures to a strike. Everybody says, why do you do mono? Because I've always had good luck with mono, because I've watched that lure enough to know where he's going to strike. He never takes a headshot the first time. I've never had a headshot. And therefore, I feel like I'm going to get more strikes. At 10 knots, I'm going to get more reactionary strikes with mono than I am with wire. Now, if I was running 20 knots, I don't think the wire's a big deal, because you're pulling it so fast. I mean, think about how fast he's swimming. By the time he's made up his mind to hit that lure, he was a football field away when he made up his mind. And that may be hard for us to understand, but he wasn't just hanging out behind it looking at it like, hey, you know, running 30 miles an hour. He wasn't just hanging out, you know. He'd made his decision back there, you know, when he come after it. At 10 knots, they do have an opportunity to look at your lures, you know, because you're not pulling that fast.
And normally, if you're going to lose one on mono, like Chase said, here's the lure's coming, the fish comes this way and eats the lure. You're not going to lose it that way. It's those rare occasions when the lure is coming this way and the fish actually catches the side of it from over here and he eats it going away. When he eats it going away, he's going to come to the leader material before the lure. But that's so rare to have a fish eat it going that way. Yes, you will lose one on. If you're fishing 150, 200, you will lose one. But it's not the norm.
Are you guys finding that on these Nomad ETX minnows, 220 whatever, you're having to change the hooks, or are you happy with the hooks out of the box based on your experience?
For the ones that have single hooks, I'm happy.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing we should cover up. Once it gets from 200 and up, they come with singles. And we actually just today, the truck delivered our brand new delivery of BKK, the actual hook that's on it, the single hook that's on it, so we have replacement hooks. But I haven't had any problems with any of my singles, okay? Now, when the lure gets smaller, it goes to a treble. And fishing story, biggest grouper I ever caught was 2008 on Dog Island Reef coming out of Carabel. It was December the 12th. Put a stretch 30 down. It's 39 feet of water. They were in spawning. Big gag grouper come and hit it. I'm the captain. My dad's on the boat. Chris Singletary's on the boat and one other guy. They hadn't fished as much as I have. I bring the fish on the boat, and as soon as I did, he flounced. Rear treble went under my tendon on this finger, went through it and popped out. And all I had on the boat was side cutters at that point, because I had only had my boat 2 years. And they tried and they tried. They never could cut that hook. So I finally just swallowed my tongue and I pulled it out. And I throwed up for a while after that. But anyway, I don't like trebles. You know, I normally swap to single hooks. I hadn't had a problem with them. But I have a pair of bolt cutters on my boat.
I'm the same way. Trebles on a stick bait lure, that's just trouble. You're asking somebody to get hooked.
When the fish flounces in the boat, there's a lot going on there when that treble is not, because normally both trebles aren't in the fish. There's normally one loose. And the bad thing is you have to remove one to get the other one. You can't get them both at once. So I'm more of a single hook guy.
And I said this earlier, when you get that fish, he comes in the boat, do not put him in the deck. Put him in the fish box, shut the lid. Unsnap that lure. Don't worry about that lure. Go over here, get another lure out, put it on this rod, put this rod back in the water. We get that lure out when that fish is dead. Don't mess with that one. It's just not that important. I mean, surely we all got at least one extra lure. Just leave him there till he chills out. He'll be fine.
Yeah, that's one of the big things. If you're really going to get into this, talking about extra lures, is don't go with just one of each color. What's going to happen? You're going to lose that one, right? And you're going to feel like that's the one they bit, but I ain't got another one to put out.
There's going to be, there's going to be two blue and whites, two red and whites.
No, I got a few more. I got a few more than this at the house. You got to be able to rotate colors. You got to be able to rotate lures. You know, I mean, come on, guys. The deal's already done here. Look where we're at. I mean, you already bought the gas.
And don't be the guy that when you go to change a lure, you bring it in the boat.
Yeah, don't be the guy that unhooks the lure and lets go of it. You know, put the lure in the boat.
Oh, I was thinking about your trip you ran this spring where the one guy kept putting the lures just in the deck.
Oh yeah, and your leaders are your friend, right? No nicks, no abrasion, right? So I had one customer just kept throwing the lures and everybody just walking on the lures every time we'd change. You know, that's another thing about when you're fishing. Roll your lures up, put your keeper on them, put them in your sink on the boat or 5-gallon bucket. Hang the hooks on a 5-gallon bucket, let them hang in the bucket. Wherever you can put them till you can get them home and take care of them.
And I promise you, I think Chase kind of mentioned this. This is where he was getting to before I made him change the story there. You will be this guy one day. We've all done this one. We decide, okay, I don't want this lure anymore. We get it up here. We unsnap this one. We snap this, go to put this lure away, and we're going to put this lure on the rod. And then this rod over here gets hit, or your buddy distracts you, or something goes on, and you get ready to put the new lure on the rod, and you go, oh, shit, that's not snapped on there. That was a $65 lure I just threw over. We've all done it before, but that will, if it hasn't happened to you, it will. We know these things about getting hooked, throwing lures over, and those because it's all happened. We know the ways not. We definitely know the way not to do it.
It's very easy to go out to the blue water and put $600-800 worth of lures in the water in a trolling spread. You know, the bigger the black bark gets, or the bigger the nomad, or the bigger Zack Attacks, the bigger they get, the more they cost. The hook sets, the leaders, you know, so it's real important that you learn how to crimp. You learn to use the correct size leader with the correct size hook. The hook needs to be in a certain location on the skirt itself. You know, every hook set does not go with every lure. You know, the hook sets are made in different lengths. One hook is inverted. Here's a great example. All right, so when you're wahoo fishing, all metal, right? You want it all metal because of their teeth. Well, have you noticed that both these hooks are the same way? And the reason for that is the top of a wahoo's mouth is much harder than the bottom. And when you hook a wahoo, you want it to come through the top of his head. If it goes through the bottom of his jaw, you're going to get a hole that wallers really quick and really large, and the odds of catching that fish are not near as good as if the hook goes through the top of that mouth. Okay?
And, you know, for me, you know, you will never see this in the pre-rig packs. The pre-rig packs come single, they come double. In the double, just like the one Chase was just showing you, they're both the same way. They come 180 opposite. They come 45. That's the 4 ways that they will come pre-rigged. One of my favorites, if we're going to truly high-speed troll, this is over 15 knots. I have my hooks opposing where they're scissor rigged. So when he bites it, there's one hook up here, there's one hook down here, his mouth is wired shut, he has no option but to drown. But none of the pre-rigs from any manufacturer, I've never seen a scissor rig. I don't know why, but I've never seen it. Do y'all have questions? You know, there's
There's a lot to cover. If I would assume a lot of you are bottom fishermen. You didn't become good. If you're a good bottom fisherman now, you didn't start that way. Go ahead.
What about trolling a little bit nearer shore? If you want to go with the family, go a few miles out, what would you suggest for trolling for like 15?
So the question was, what if you're trolling closer to shore? So it's basically near shore and offshore are basically the same. The techniques don't change. It's just size of lures. You know.
And target species.
Right. You got kings, mahi, and blackfin versus wahoo, larger mahi, and yellowfin. And, you know, probably like a rapala, 12 to 14 size, the 4.5 to 5.5 inch yozuris. Instead of the large cedar plug that Chase had out there, they make a 3 and a 4 inch cedar plug. It's the same. The tactics didn't change, just the size of everything changed. Yes, sir.
In the wintertime, is there a wahoo fishery at the southwest edge?
It's generally not quite that close. They will come up to that edge. So the fishery is about bait. This winter, I'm going to say that the wahoos may stay on the edge if the forecast does what they're predicting. They may stay that close inshore most of the winter. And I get them confused. We're either going to be in La Nina or El Nino or whatever.
La Nina.
La Nina.
La Nina.
We're supposed to have a much warmer and drier than average winter. In that case, that warmer water is going to be closer. The bait fish are going to be closer. So we may have wahoos on the edge at least all the way through the end of the year and possibly into January. In a year where we have a lot more cold weather, that may not be the case. But I think we're going to have a good offshore season. And some of the better fishing that we have for this offshore winter fishery is when it is very, very cold. In very beginning, we talked about having bibs and raincoats and things to be able to keep warm. Because some of these mornings you may leave here and it may be 34, 36, 38 degrees. And I can tell you, if you've never done this, you're going to know when you get to the area that you need to fish. Because you're going to be running along and everybody in the boat's freezing to death. I normally look like the little kid from a Christmas story. I got everything I own on. I can't. Well, you'll be running along and then all of a sudden, you're going to be looking and it's like, dang, I'm hot. And you start looking, the water looks different. And you're going to go through, you may not cross a line per se that you can physically see the line in the water, but you're going to drive across a temperature break. And all of a sudden, you've been freezing your butt off the whole ride out. And now it's like, wait a minute, I'm down to, in the next 15, 20 minutes, I'm down to a t-shirt and shorts. We're 80 miles offshore. We're doing all our fishing. We start to run home and we kind of go across that imaginary line and all of a sudden it's cold again. Now here we go, all the clothes back on. When you go, when you're running out there in the morning, you start to get hot, you're starting to come into the right area that you need to be fishing. Yes, sir.
How significant is the trolling speed and call it the low speed regime, 6 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour, I know it varies with the bait type,
So we typically what's called ballyhoo speed. If we're going to throw baits into our spread, that's more of a 6 to 10 knot range. And if we're going to troll only lures, then we can be anywhere in that 6 to about 14, 15 knots. So we can cover more ground with just lures, but sometimes I think the fishing is better at bait speeds, and there's no thing that says today is going to be a better bait day and tomorrow is going to be a better lure day. That is a little bit of experimentation on a given day. But anywhere in that range, 6 is about as slow as you're going to fish, and on a normal day for most people, their gear is going to allow them to troll 13 to 15 knots. Or in Chase's case, 15 to 17 miles an hour.
I'm a 10 to 12 mile an hour dude. That's what I pull my ballyhoo at. That's, I've been successful at it, and other people are successful other ways. I think that
That's the perfect speed to burn a lot of fuel where you go.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing is what is your hull? What is your push? Once you get to a certain point, your bow rises and you start pushing water, your fuel goes to crap. And also, if you'll look at the wake off the back of your boat, it looks like crap. That's a big deal with the third, fourth, fifth, sixth wave with your lure. You want your lure right on the front side of that wake. Whether it's the third one, fourth one, fifth one, you want it on the front side so that it looks like it's coming down the hill. And you can see it. You can see what the lure's doing in the water. If you put it behind the wave, you can't see it, and it has no action. It's buried in a piece of wake, right? So, and that's gonna vary as the water moves away from the hull on your outriggers, and the further you put your baits back. If it's smooth, if it's 0 to 1, like I've seen it in July, and it's sweltering out there, you know what I mean, and there's no wind, your bait's you're not going to make a lot of wake, right? You're going to have to do an adjustment on your lures. You got to make your lures work with the wake of your boat and the action the ocean is giving you, because every trolling day is going to be a little different. And trolling is no different than bottom fishing. If you don't go spend your time on it and pay attention and here's the worst thing that can happen, and I know everybody's going to do it. When you load up to go trolling, don't take a bottom rod. Take your trolling spread and tell everybody on the boat, guys, we're going trolling today. That's the only way you're going to learn. Because if you don't, you're going to spend 45 minutes trolling. And they're going to say, man, I've had my first beer and I'm bored. Let's go catch some snapper. What you going to do? As a captain, you're going to make everybody happy and you're going to pull all that stuff out of the water. Now you got to take all them rod and reels home and wash them. Yep. And then they're going to get all the bottom gear out and we're going to go bottom fish.
And you got to run 40 miles back inshore.
And you're going to run 40 miles back inshore to do it. So leave them at home. And the people understand when they get on a boat. We're going trolling. There's nothing wrong with taking one deep drop rod and some live bait. If you know you're at the steps or the elbow or something on the way back, yeah, make a couple of drops. But don't carry enough for everybody. I guarantee you won't troll. Because it's hours of boredom that you have to learn how to set your spread, speed of boat, color of lure. Am I in the right spot? Is the bait here? If they're not, I need to move. All that takes time, effort, energy. And if all you do is run to one spot, throw your lures out and troll for 45 minutes, and bring them in and run 40 miles back to bottom fish, you won't never catch a fish of a lifetime. You won't never catch that yellowfin or that 65 or 70 pound dolphin. Not trolling. You may catch him on a weed line and you cross it on the way back to that bottom spot. So that's, I love trolling. So I don't get bored, and I made a rule I don't drink a beer until the first fish is on the boat. So some days it's a long day.
So, are you familiar with the $100 bill trick?
No, show me.
So, it's kind of like you're going trolling. Well, the first thing you need to do if we're going trolling is we do need to make a a beer offering to the gods early that day. So you want to crack one there at sunrise. Pour out your little bit, appease the gods. You can also set that first rig out, put a $100 bill right there, wrap it up a couple times, see which one gets bit.
Y'all got any questions?
Yeah, I thought that was a giveaway ticket.
Sir? I believe that you should watch all of them. I believe you should. I mean, here's the thing about it, and I believe this for bottom fishing, trolling, or whatever you do as your boat captain. You should have a captain's log. You should understand what the tide was, what the lunar cycle was, what the solar cycle was, because there is no way for you to build data because you can't remember last July 3rd. The only reason I remember specific days is because something special happened. Every day is not special, right? So if you don't build data yourself so that you can look back, last May 30th of 2022, we slayed the red snapper, or we caught this in this location, the tide was this, the water clarity was this. If you don't make notes, there's no way for you to look back and judge what you're going to do tomorrow from back yesterday. Because nobody remembers all of it. I think it's all important. And I think, one of the charter boat captains been going to the Tuna, been going to the oil rigs a pretty good bit here lately. He said he's been getting all of his strikes on a certain phase of the moon. Now he wouldn't tell me what the phase was. Okay, but at least he told me that it was very important. I kind of figure I know which one it is. Yes, I think it matters. I think time of day matters.
Do you ever troll at night, like on your way out to your spot?
No. I hadn't never done it. The big thing for me is with tuna, whether it's blackfin or yellowfin. To me, tuna rise in the morning. They rise from those depths, those oil rigs at daylight. If you got to leave the night before to get there at daylight, great. But if you leave at daylight on Friday morning and you come back before daylight of Saturday morning, I think you missed the prime bite. Does that make sense? To me, it's called a witching hour. Wahoo's the same way. You got from daylight till 2 hours. That's the witching hour in the morning. Same way at sunset. From whenever the sun's going to set, back it up 2 hours. To me, you got to be on the Wahoo grounds those times a day. Now, you're going to catch one at 1 o'clock sometimes? Yes. But your odds go up greatly during those other times of day.
And this weekend, we're going to be on a full moon. And that 11 to 2 period, when the moon's exactly opposite the Earth, that's going to be a major bite time also for all your different species. Yeah.
You were going to be close in targeting blackfin, and you were just pulling 2 rods. Smaller boat, closer in, and you wanted to go blackfin. What would be your setup, your lure selection?
So the question was, if you're patrolling inshore for the winter blackfin fishery, like on the Navarre kayak reefs, what would you lose? The size 12 and size 14 ghost white Rapala and the ghost white Yozuri and the 4.5 and 5.5 inch size.
In the long cast.
Yes.
You wouldn't worry about any skirted lures on the surface?
What last thing you said?
In the long cast.
Yeah,
That Yozuri is the long cast version.
Yeah.
Strictly diving baits, hard baits?
They're hard baits. They got small lips on them, but they're not tremendously deep divers.
So it's not an X-Wrap, it's more of a...
It is an X. The Rapala is an X-Wrap, but it's a short lip bill, and we sell like all the kayak guys that are doing that down there off the Navarre kayak reefs. Those are the 2 lures and the 2 sizes and strictly white. We sell more white than any other color. I take a lot of the lures come with a white base underneath them, and I've taken blue lures when we're out of white ones but I needed a new one and sanded the blue color off to where it's just solid white. I've spray painted them white.
Do you think it's important to get out there at daybreak?
Yep. You need to be, if you're going to the Navarre Kayak Reefs, you need to be there when the sun comes up.
You need to be able to watch it come over the water, come out of the water.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we appreciate everybody coming out. I'm sure y'all have questions. Don't leave. We got some really good stuff to give away here.
Yeah.
Of course, this is our last seminar of the year. We're going to give everybody a break over Christmas in January. We'll be back and starting this again in February. We hope to see all of y'all then, starting a new season out. But we want to thank everybody for coming out. Mary, y'all going to come up and give some stuff away? You going to help Melissa? Sure. She's like, I don't think so. So let's give away
Thank
the
y'all.
hat and shirt combos first. And
No.
we do have, we're going to give away some shirts and hats and stuff first, but we do have about 5 Nomad lures that Guy Herring had sent for us to give away tonight.
Nice. Thank you.
Yes,
What months do you catch wet? When does that start and stop?
it started last month, and it will really go till about somewhere mid-March. Peaks in, probably the peak of that is February, but I've seen the peak be as early as the first full week of January.
And distance, how far offshore are those months?
They're about a mile offshore and 21 miles down the beach. And it's about 2 miles long and 3/4 of a mile wide. There's 587 pyramids in those Navarre Reef complex. And then there's another complex just offshore of those. And then there's actually 2 more complexes before you get all the way down there that people kind of forget about. They were built as kayak reefs, but one of them is probably about where the green tank is, the water tank between Navarre and Fort Walton. And it's the same thing, it's about a mile offshore. Well, they built that set, doesn't have as many, it's only got about 200 of them pyramids in it. They built that as a kayak reef, but somebody didn't think that out very well because the closest launch for a kayak is about 5 or 6 miles either direction. I mean, you got a 6-mile paddle before you ever get there. So those 2 aren't very well thought out. But there are 2 sets before you get to the Navarre set. You don't have to go all the way to the Navarre set. There are 2, and they're clearly, if you look at them on the county website, I mean, there's 2 clear sets of them before you get there. One's it's probably 12 miles to the first set and 15 to the second set, and then 21 down in Navarre.
So a couple weeks ago when they were coming through good over there, we were catching most of them in about 3 miles of water. Right around here.
Yeah, one of the guys works up the shop, Aiden, he caught 4 out of his kayak one day. Had to throw one back because you can only have three per person.
How are they fishing for them out of county? They're not trolling.
Yeah,
Yeah, they troll.
look at the pedal kayaks.
Oh, okay.
They troll in the same little lures.
It's how fast they can pedal.
17 knots, right?
All right, so pull some names out.
Ken Reed.
Ken Reed? All right.
Great, thank you very much.
Scott Miller.
You're already out of your seat. You knew you were going to win?
Mr. Back Row's winning today.
Go see Melissa. We'll get this out of your way.
David Daughtery.
All right, so
Chris Smoot. Richard Miles.
Richard?
Yes, sir.
Here it comes.
Sloan.
Hey, look at that. Front row one.
See, that's what you get for showing up early.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Rod Albert. Rod Brinks. Brink. Scott.
No, you're out of stuff.
Oh, sorry.
Oh. So anyway, again, thanks everybody for coming out. If you have any questions, we'll be around for a few minutes up here, except for I got to go to the restroom, and then come by the store, see us at the shop. Thanks for coming.
Yes.
You only run 200 pound cast?
Most of mine's on 200. Now, some of my bigger lures are 300.
Okay.
All
My
right.
bigger lures are 3, but that's 200.
How often do you get a Wahoo to hit the cedar plug?
I want to see your knot because I always run stainless. I never seen you.
Let me turn this off.